Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Thank you so much for joining today. And we're going to speak. The title that you all received is How to Fight, but the real extended title is How to Fight and Win the Relationship. So thank you so much for giving us this opportunity. We're both going to speak to you. I'm just going to say a few things and then I'll introduce Anuttama and he'll give his thoughts. So really, we want to touch on how to fight, how not to fight, when not to fight, who to fight with, who not to fight with, and what to fight about and what not to fight about. So we want to speak broadly. We want to talk about various kinds of relationships. And maybe you've heard this saying that we always hurt the ones we love. So we tend to, in our intimate relationships of all sorts, they can tend to be the most painful, whether it's a relationship with a child, a teenager, a parent, a sibling, a partner, or a very dear friend. So Anuttama and I were in New Vrindavan last weekend, and something very interesting happened. We were having breakfast with some friends. They invited us over to their home for breakfast, and we were sitting out on their lovely front porch out there in the rural area in the country. And they have a row of hummingbird feeders hanging there on their porch. And they have about 30 to 40 hummingbirds that come there every year and just feast on the nectar that these sweet devotees provide for them. So they were telling us that what happens is sometimes some of the birds start fighting, and they're so busy fighting that they get involved in fighting with each other, and then other ones of the hummingbirds start to drink all the nectar. So the ones who are fighting get all distracted, and other ones come and drink the sweet nectar. So we were thinking, wow, this is really a metaphor for us, for our topic that we wanted to discuss. So what nectar do we miss while we're busy fighting? That's kind of the question that I'm throwing out. So Anuttama Prabhu is going to speak a little bit, and then we'll have some Q&A that you can direct to him or to both of us, and then I'll speak a little bit. So thank you so much for joining. Hare Krishna.
Hey, Hare Krishna, everyone. Thank you for having us here. I noted a lot of familiar faces. I can't see everybody. There's too many of you, even on the gallery view. There's so many devotees here, so appreciate you all being here. Particularly at one point I saw Braj Bihari Prabhu's name was up there, who is one of the co-leaders of the ISKCON Resolve, which deals specifically with conflict resolution. So in all honesty, if you haven't already had him on this session to talk about the same topic, I think he's a real gem. And some of the things that I'm going to speak about, we learned from him. And he really specializes in this. So I just want to highlight that.
Actually, it's probably his wife, Ananda Vrindavan, using his computer, because this is supposed to be a ladies' sangha with no men invited other than you.
I just renamed Ananda.
Either that or I just blew his cover. I'm not sure which one.
There she is. I'm going to pin her so you can see it's her.
Apologies, I forgot to change the name.
Okay, no problem. Honored to have him with us, and more honored to have you here. I will mention one thing's been kind of puzzling me, considering there's so many friends here that have known Rukmini and myself, or each of us individually, for so many years. I was kind of wondering which one of you got hold of Govinda Priya when she said the topic was how to fight, and said, oh, you got to have Rukmini and Anuttama on this one. But whoever you are, thanks for helping us think about our relationship and how to make it better. I'm going to kind of talk about some things largely from the big picture. That's kind of, I'm better at that, I think. And I think Rukmini is going to maybe touch on a few more, some specific things. I am going to highlight about 7 points I think are essential in the way we look at relationships in general. And the topic Rukmini and I were discussing, we're kind of looking at relationships across the board, you know, relationships with peers, relationships or fighting with peers, with superior, so-called, with people that are junior, with friends, with partners, with marital partners. So what we're going to talk about kind of touches upon all of those things. And we're speaking from our experience as married partners for about 35 years now. Some of you may want, because I was thinking as I put my thoughts together, I'm going to kind of touch on quite a few topics. So if it's not too intrusive to ask it, you may even want to take notes. I never like to go back and re-listen to these things. I don't have the time, but there may be some things you may find interesting to jot down. So first, I just want to kind of put it in context that we all know, we've studied for many years, we know from the Bible, Thomas describes that we currently live in the age of love and trust. And we see that happening on the streets and in the political capitals all around the world today. Everybody is just so immersed in appreciation and respect and tolerance and patience with each other. It's practically no need to even talk about this topic. And of course, that's ridiculous because it's just the opposite. We see the age of quarrel and hypocrisy being manifest all around us, and so many quarrels that are there, between around the world, between communities, between races, between religions, between genders, between ethnicities. It's kind of very sad to see. And I think it's really important as devotees for us all to know that we want to, in our own lives, know how to deal with quarrel or fighting that comes up or disagreements, and how to minimize the harm that sometimes comes. It's one thing to have disagreements, but the real issue is when it causes harm, either emotionally or psychologically or in terms of the relationship or other people. And I was reminded, just looking at Prabhupada's 7 purposes, which we just observed the 54th anniversary of last week or so, a lot of dialogues and Zoom conferences on that. So Prabhupada mentions in his very first purpose, which I think is beautiful, and I think if somebody asked me what's your mission statement, I would say personally, I just want to be a part of this. He says, the 7th purpose of ISKCON, I'll just read the first one, to systematically propagate spiritual knowledge to society at large, and to educate all peoples in the techniques of spiritual life in order to check the imbalance of values in life, and here's the part directly related to today's topic, and to achieve real unity and peace in the world. So someone asks, what's your goal in life? Well, as at least as the part of our life that is focused on being devotees in ISKCON and Prabhupada and Nugas, to achieve real unity and peace in the world. So we really are meant to be peacemakers. It's a core mission of our collective spiritual community. So I think it's really important for us as individuals and as a community that we kind of walk our talk, and that we don't, I think one of the flaws, if you will, within our larger communities is a tendency we lift up our philosophy because it's so beautiful. I mean, who else has much insight about the personality of Godhead and the nature of the spiritual world and the different rasas? And, that's just profoundly profound. But sometimes we almost kind of hide behind that and say, look, that's so good, don't look at anything else. And Rukmini and I've had experiences in interfaith dialogues where sometimes we kind of put up this beautiful philosophy and theology we have, and our partners in dialogue talk about, well, we don't have as much depth as you do, but we're trying to learn how to live our lives as good and spiritual people in this world. And we've been in situations where we kind of melted and felt like, well, actually, we got a great philosophy. We're not so good at the practical things. And I think we have to catch up. Both things need to be there. So 7 points I want to make. Prabhupada had 7 purposes. I thought here's 7 points. First thing I would say, it's really important in terms of fighting and conflict resolution and keeping, winning the relationship. We always have to keep the big picture in mind. 99% of the time, maybe more, the relationship is more important than the argument. Rukmini and I, we like to get different agreements about really, really, really important things. Like right now, we have 4 fold-up chairs in the entrance of our home because we're having trouble deciding which 2 we're going to keep for our little new patio at our apartments. It's like a major thing, and she kind of likes the way this one feels, and I like the way that one feels. But it's not that big of a deal, whatever. We don't want that to kind of escalate into being some kind of, something to get fighting about. And it reminded me a few years ago, we both went and heard a man named Howard Lyman. Some of you might recognize that name. He's a big animal rights activist, former Montana cattle raiser, who became a vegan activist. And I don't even know if he's still alive, but wonderful guy, very charismatic. And we heard him speak, and he tells a story in his introduction. He introduces, my wife is here, I forget her name, but we've been married for 45 years. Everybody applauds. Wow, 45 years, that's great. And then he says to the audience, would you like to know the secret of our success? And of course, everyone says, yes, what's your secret? He says, the secret of our success is when we first got married, we decided in the very beginning how we would divide up who makes the decision in the family. And he says, and I want you all to know, I'll share our formula with you. I make all of the big decisions, Howard says. Howard, I make all of the big decisions, and my wife makes all of the small decisions. And some people laugh in the audience, and some are like a little uncomfortable, and geez, that seems kind of, you know, too male dominated and all that. And then he goes on and explains, of course, one thing I should tell you, that one thing we agreed upon is one of the small decisions that she makes is whether decisions are big decisions or small decisions. So he makes the big decisions, she makes the small decisions, but one of the small decisions is which category each decision falls into. So that was something he talked about that. So, you know, how they worked around this, and he's making a decision, delegating authority. And as another book was written a few years ago, some of you probably read the whole video series and all that, called Don't Sweat the Small Stuff, and then the subcategory, and it's all small stuff. You know, we tend to get so upset and concerned about things sometimes, like, well, let's keep the big picture in mind. And as Vaishnavas, we know we're meant to be servants of the servant, whether it's our, you know, our spouse or our children or our bosses or our, it doesn't matter. There's no hierarchy other than I'm the servant of the servant of the servant of the servant. So keeping that in mind is really important to always remember that. So if we go into any kind of situation, understanding, one, I'm the servant, and whatever difficulty is here, I should maintain my role as a servant. And two, the relationship is more important than whatever this disagreement is. So that's my first point. Second one, to see disagreements as an opportunity to learn and grow. And we hear this all the time, but it's a fact, to kind of have that mindset. There are going to be disagreements, whether it's within communities. I'm a GVC member, and you know, every 5 years or so, there's a little disagreement comes up within a community that I have to pay attention to. But there are disagreements, and those are things that then enrich it. You know, Vrinda's there. Vrinda knows, right? Isn't it, Vrinda? About every 5 years or so, a little tiny disagreement comes up. Might take, you know, 10, 15 minutes to resolve it. And we think, yeah, we're being enriched by this. So, you know, when those kind of things come up, to have a mindset ahead of time that if there is a disagreement, what am I meant to learn from this? And how can I grow from this, from seeing a different opinion? You know, I remember as a child, my father had this particularly disturbing technique. He would get angry, and when there would be some kind of family discussion or quarrel, he would stand up in the middle of dinner and make his point. Sometimes he'd slam his fist on the table, but make his point, and then he'd walk out of the room, like kind of when it was your turn to say something. And then he'd be gone for about 5 minutes, and, you know, everything would calm down. And then he'd come back in the room and he'd say, and another thing. And he would make another point. And then he would walk out of the room. So that really kind of shut down any sense of any growth or any exchange. So better to have an idea that, okay, I may not agree with you, but let's hear what you have to say. It's an opportunity for growth and to learn how to be better people and learn other perspectives on things. So that's my second point that came to mind. The third one, we've all heard this a million times, but I teach this around the world, listening skills. Generally, we're not very good listeners. And it is something that I think we should be teaching our children, and they should teach in schools, and we should teach in our temples. Many times when there's a conversation and we appear to be listening, you know, we're fighting with somebody, we're disagreeing, and they're speaking their points, and we're just like waiting to pounce. We're not really listening to what they have to say. We're just waiting. As soon as they take a breath, and then we go, yeah, but I think this. And there's no communication there. We're just talking over each other. There's no real exchange. So to be able to practice, and you know, if those of you who've already learned these things, to practice it better, those of you that don't, go online and look up, you know, reflective listening, how to respond to what's both the feeling and the content of that we've heard. And to be able to reflect, okay, Rukmini, if I understand you correctly, you really think this particular chair to go on the patio is better than that one because of this reason. And you don't really think that whatever I thought about this is particularly relevant because of this and this and this. To be able to really hear and exchange, that's such a critical thing. So I was thinking, just as an example, I remember when we first moved here, Washington, D.C., 2 decades or so ago. And one devotee who I don't know where he is in the world these days, but he came in to show me as the communications director. He said, I just had a very interesting phone call with the woman who gives us permission to do the Rath Yatra. I'd like to play the tape of it. And then this tape that he put back, he's having a discussion with her. And then it goes from a discussion, because she starts saying, well, you need to do this and this and this to get a permit. And he starts saying, well, no, we're not going to do that. And she says, yes, you have to. And he says, no, we're not. And they literally started yelling at each other. And and that was the end of the recording. And I was thinking, why are you playing this for me other than to have me, severely chastise you? Like, what are you doing, you kooky guy? This person has all the power over whether or not we're going to be in Rath Yatra. And as of now, we are out of the Washington, D.C. 4th of July parade. It's a big, huge event, hundreds of thousands of people. You were representing us, and you couldn't even give this woman the respect and the courtesy to hear what her complaints were. So we had to go through a whole ordeal. We got some of the senior respected members of the congregation, some like professors of Indian origin, to come and kind of meet with them and talk about how this is an authentic tradition. We had to get some lawyers involved to say, by the way, this seems like you're biased against us, and kind of, wave the red flag in front of them. And meanwhile, I was just kind of making friends with them, saying, well, what are the issues you have? Let me try to understand you better. How can we work it out? And Ananda Vrindavan's on here, as she knows. I mean, the Rath Yatra, recently COVID, there's issues, of course, but it's gone on like nonstop ever since that time. No issues, because we worked with them in a cooperative way. And I remember at one point in time we had a meeting, she kind of leaned over to me, and I don't say this by any way a means of like, flattering myself, but just to emphasize the potency of listening. Here's a lady ready to go to court to get the Hare Krishnas kicked out of her 4th of July parade. And she leaned over, she said, actually, you're very good for your organization. Because she's comparing this fellow who calls up on the phone and screams at her. He might have been right. She might have been completely wrong in all the things she wanted, but it wasn't going to help just to be yelling at her. And I just took the time to listen, to find out what the issues were, sort it out, and to able to move forward on it. So practice being good listeners. There's a great quote from the Dalai Lama that actually Rukmini shared with me. When you talk, you are only repeating what you already know. When we talk, we're only repeating what we already know. But if we listen, we might learn something new. So again, to keep that mindset, that if I just listen, I might learn something new. So those are 3 points. Here's my 4th one. Really important for devotees. Be open-minded and be self-critical. It's so hard in this age. We all tend to be so kind of proud of ourselves and our learning, and we kind of fixed in our perspective and things. And then people get self-righteous, and you look in the United States, those are the United States these days, and there's people that are protesting, convinced that the system's rotten, and there are many, many wrong things in the system. And there's other people that are standing up saying, you people are going overboard, and we're going to fight against you from that perspective. And they both have something that's a little right, and they both have a lot that's a little something that's wrong. But again, they're not listening to each other. They get stuck, and then the conflicts just get worse. So it's important for us, especially as individual devotees and as those as maybe leaders of communities, to always keep an open mind. Remember, I may be wrong on some of this. And there's a beautiful story. Stephen Covey, who many of you may have read some of his works, and actually I was fortunate to give him a Bhagavad Gita ago when he was leadership. And he tells a wonderful story, and if you've heard it before, it's still beautiful to hear 2 or 3 or 10 times. He tells a story of a man who was on a subway train. And he noticed there was a family sitting nearby, and the father was there and kind of looking out the window, kind of in a daze, not paying much attention. And the 2 young children were just running up and down the subway train and just, making noise and disturbing everybody and completely out of control and just a real disturbance. As we all know, sometimes children get a little carried away. So the one man was watching the father thinking, what's wrong with you? What kind of father, what kind of parent are you? Don't you realize how much trouble your kids are causing? like that. And he tolerated for a while. And at a certain point, he went over and he tapped this man on the shoulder. He said, "Excuse me, but your kids are really disturbing this whole carload of people. Can you please do something about it?" And the man looked at him and kind of, again, like coming out of a daze, he said, "Oh, I'm so sorry. Please excuse us. We've just come from the funeral of their mother, and we're all pretty disturbed right now." And then the man who was feeling hurt or critical immediately realized, "Oh, I had no idea the context. And given that context, who am I to come over here and critique you?" You know, he was not being open-minded. He was allowing himself to be critical and very wrong in what was actually going on there. I know Vraj Bihari Prabhu mentioned earlier in ISKCON Resolve, he teaches something I think very, very profound. I try to remember. If I'm in a conversation or I'm quarreling with somebody or fighting with someone, if I say something, I know the intention of my words. I say, "Hey, Vrinda, you know, I really think that, you know, you're kind of controlling things too much up there, and I think you need to back off." Now, in my mind, I'm just very, very facetious. We're good friends, and I love everything she does. But in my mind, I'm thinking, you know, the intention was, hey, I'm trying to share some good thoughts to help you improve your service. What I'm not aware of is the impact. You know, it's time for you to back off. That may be like a trigger point. Maybe 6 people told her today, "Hey, back off." And that might cause some real issues for her. So I'm aware of my intention, but I don't know the impact on others. And similarly, I know the impact of what other people say to me, but I don't know their intention. So Rukmini, maybe one night I come home or whatever, we're both out doing this and that, and she says something to me kind of in a hurry. And I think, "Oh, that was really hurtful. Why did you say that?" I assume because of the impact, I assume her intention was not good, but that's not a fact. I don't know her intention. So we should be very, very careful to not make assumptions. You know, the classic one, you know, the husband comes home late for dinner, or it could be the wife these days, whatever, the spouse comes home late for dinner. Let's say husbands, these just keep track of my mind. The husband comes home late for dinner, and the wife assumes that, you know, you did that intentionally. You knew it was Tuesday night, and I always cook a big dinner on Tuesday. And he's just thinking in his mind, the boss made me stay late. I can't believe it. And now I walk in the house and she's yelling at me also. So she's assuming you came late because you didn't care about me. And that's a wrong assumption. And he may assume when she gets upset, well, you're getting upset because you don't care about what happened at the office today. Both of them are making assumptions. So don't make those kind of assumptions. It's not healthy. When I was younger, I worked at a summer camp, and I studied sailing a little bit and then taught it. And there was a wonderful poem. I halfway remembered, but this video allowed me to look it up again. So here's this poem about sailing and the rules of sailing. And when you sail, when you're in the middle of a lake or an ocean, whatever, there's a boat coming your way. You need to know who's got to move which way, brother. It's pretty dangerous. So here's the poem. It's called Michael O'Day. Some of you may have heard of the poem of Michael O'Day. Only 4 lines. Here lies the body of Michael O'Day. He died defending his right of way. He knew the rules, and he was right. What he was doing was right. So he died defending his right of way. He was right, dead right, as he sailed along, but just as dead as if he'd been wrong. So we may have, the rules may be in our favor, but, don't be stuck. What's the ultimate effect going to be? And be a little bit self-critical and a little more open-minded. So 5, cultural differences. In ISKCON, we are a global cultural diversity tradition package community. And there's a lot of differences that people, in our marriages and our friendships. Cultural differences are really good if we manage them properly. They can enrich in us. And a little story, Rukmini asked me to tell this. I was in a conference in Macedonia, which is north of Greece, in Europe, a few years ago. And I met a man from America who was a Russian Orthodox priest in the American branch of the Russian Orthodox priest. And anyway, we had a conversation, kind of a longer story, but the gist of it is, after some couple of days, he came up and he told me, I really need to tell you something. He said, I've actually been avoiding you the last couple of days. I didn't know if I wanted to talk about this, but I think I should. He said, I want you to know, and I'm a Hare Krishna with my tilak and Sikha and dhoti and all that. And he's got his big beard, Russian Orthodox, black outfit, hat and all that. And he said, I want to tell you how I became an Orthodox priest. He said, one of my very best friends in high school became a Hare Krishna devotee. And that caused me to kind of look back at my own tradition and question my own spirituality. And I became a Russian Orthodox priest because of this friend who was a Hare Krishna. So I think keeping that in mind always, cultural differences are great values to us. You know, the classic story of the man from Sweden who marries the Italian woman. And the first time they have a quarrel, she's doing what, you know, the Italian culture generally, there's always uniqueness, but general tendency of the culture. She wants to talk about it, right? You know, and express herself and share her thoughts and her emotions. And, you know, but the Swedish man, I was recently in Sweden, and then this is a pretty accurate description of the general culture. Their culture, there's a quarrel, you walk away, you quiet down, you wait and you talk about it at a different time. So much so I was visiting some devotee friends in Sweden, and they told me, if you have 2 apartments opening, if you open your door, they said they were there for months, they never saw their neighbors. Because every time they would open their door, the neighbors would close their door. I asked them, well, what's that about? They said, because there's a sense of you give people space. So if you're walking into the shared space, if they see you're already there, they close the door, they wait for you to leave. You know, there's that much of a sense of social distance. So this Italian woman is married to a Swedish man. She's kind of running around, following around the house, and he's like kind of like trying to get away from her. So, you know, we need to understand there's cultural differences and not to have that be a source of conflict, but and don't assume that the way we do things is the way to do things. Okay, 2 more points. 1, we should always think about the collateral damage, just like these hummingbirds in the story Rukmini mentioned. You know, they're fighting, but meanwhile, and we saw it, they're over there fighting, flying around, quarreling, and the other birds are just drinking all of the hummingbird sweet water that's there. So what's the collateral damage? How's it impacting our friends? How's it impacting our family? Maybe there's some quarrel comes up. I remember as a child asking my parents, they were married for 60 years, but they quarreled sometimes. And I remember asking them as a kid, how come you fight so much? My mother's response was, we're not fighting, we're discussing. But from a child's point of view, you're not discussing, you're fighting. And it was painful. It was really painful. So in a marriage especially, you know, when there's children or other family members to stop and think, wait a minute, what's the collateral damage? Is it really worth whatever the damage is on that? You know, a story from the Mahabharata comes to mind when Dronacharya was killed, and the Pandavas started kind of quarreling amongst each other, saying that wasn't proper, just to do me, you shouldn't have done that, this, that, and they were arguing, and they're almost ready to, like, you know, draw arms against each other. Meanwhile, because their Acharya had been killed, the Kaurava army now is irate, and they've reorganized, and they're like charging full steam ahead. And the Pandavas are saying, hey, we're fighting amongst ourselves, but look who's coming. Right over the hill, here comes Duryodhana with his entire army. And if we're finished, if we don't stop this quarrel. So in a similar way, what's the collateral damage? You know, if we're fighting as parents, what's the effect upon our children? If we're fighting in the community, what's the effect upon the community? If we're fighting as a religious, larger community, what's the effect upon our ability to teach and to preach? Like that, okay? And then the last point I have, and then we'll turn it back, maybe some questions, or we'll turn it back to Rukmini. I think maybe this is the most important one. I try to think about this in my work in ISKCON communications, to always start by taking responsibility. What am I responsible for? If there's some kind of quarrel, even if it's 90% the other person's fault, and that's rare, it's usually more like 50-50. But even if it's 90% their fault, 10% is mine. And as we know, that's the 10% that I have some control over. So being willing to admit that we're wrong, and how, you know, maybe we're really stuck in some quarrel and some disagreement, but okay, what piece of it am I responsible for? How can I fix that? What change can I make? And sometimes that's the best way to get some kind of forward motion, especially if 2 people are stuck. And I have an issue sometimes with what I've seen in ISKCON cultures as a sense, well, I'm senior, they're junior, so they're supposed to be the one to kind of back down or apologize. And I think it's the exact opposite. The senior person should be the more mature person, should be the more humble person, should be the more reasonable person, should be the person that doesn't need to get the credit. And they should be the one that says, look, you know, I'm sorry for whatever I've done to contribute to this. I think that's really important. And last little story, Rukmini also asked me to share this. Years ago, and sorry it's so ancient, but I'm kind of ancient now, so a lot of my stories are ancient. I was on a TV show years ago called Larry King Live, which in those days was a big deal. It was about a book distribution case we lost in the U.S. Supreme Court. No, yeah, U.S. Supreme Court about Minnesota. And in the middle of it, you know, somebody called in and said these people are really kind of nasty the way they approach people. And, you know, previously kind of discussing the philosophical and legal points, but they got a call and, you know, Hari-Krishnas really bothered people. And we did bother people in those days. It was, we were over the top. So Larry King starts doing a follow-up question with me, but I was kind of prepared when this call in came. And I said, look, Larry, you know, most of our members are young. We've only been in America for 10, 15 years, and we've made a lot of mistakes and we apologize for those. And right when I said, and we've made a lot of mistakes and apologize for those, he was literally like leaning forward in his chair about to say, but, and then I said, we apologize. And he kind of backed off and asked a different question. Because I had apologized, and it was a sincere apology. We made a lot of mistakes, and we apologize. And not just that we apologize, here's what we're doing to try to make sure we don't make those mistakes again. So in a similar way in our relationships and our quarrels and our fighting, to be able to take responsibility, fix what we can fix, and it really helps diffuse the situation. So again, just to summarize, you know, keep the big picture in mind. It's not, you know, don't sweat the small stuff. The relationship's more important than whatever the issue is. See disagreements that may come up as opportunities for growth. Always be a good listener. There's something we can learn, even if we are very fixed. The other person's opinion is important to know. When we talk, we're only repeating what we know. When we listen, we may learn something. Be open-minded and self-critical. Cultural differences are our strength. Don't just see them as I'm right, she or he is wrong. This enriches us. Very much think about the collateral damage. While we're quarreling or fighting, I'm allowing myself to be in this mood. What's being lost? And then this last one, take responsibility. So, Govinda Priya, should we go to Rukmini or should we take a couple questions? How would you like us to do this?
I think we can take some questions or comments if anyone has any comments. So yeah, we have something from Shamala Kishori, and she's saying, how can we communicate with the person who takes over the conversation and doesn't listen?
Rukmini should handle that one. How do you deal with me, Rukmini?
No, that's for you. You're the expert.
How do you communicate with a person who takes over the conversation, doesn't listen? I would say a big part of it, first, it depends on your relationship with them. If this was a casual visit, you know, you kind of smilingly, respectfully, you know, talk, and then you respectfully, pleasantly say, it was so nice speaking with you. I mean, hearing you, or, you know, it was so nice spending time with you, and I need to go do this. And you bow out, and they kind of go on your list, like, you know, careful about them next time because you're going to waste a lot of time. That's one extent. If it's someone you have a better relationship with, and you can just express to them. And usually I like to kind of blame somebody else, like, hey, Vishnu Das, I was on this really wonderful program the other day with a group of Vaishnavis, and we were talking about communication skills. And you won't believe what they said. They talked about if we all learn how to listen to each other, we'll have much deeper relationships. Isn't that interesting? What do you think about that? In other words, rather than coming in saying, you don't listen, you know, saying, hey, I just learned something new. I thought I'd share it with you. That's something that oftentimes works, at least for me. And yeah, I mean, personally, that's what I do. I look for an opportunity to kind of share a little teaching with them in a way that they'll take it, because you know, or else you don't waste your time with those kind of people. Or a third thing, sometimes it is just a fact because we all are insecure. We all are excited to share our thoughts and our realizations. And sometimes maybe there's four. One, maybe they just don't know. So you can in a very gentle way say, you know, so-and-so, I'm really excited to have you share things, but I don't mean to offend you in any way, but actually sometimes the way you communicate it, you only talk and you don't listen. No offense, please, no offense. But I'd like you to hear some of the things I like to say too. So what I heard you just say, and then model it. You know, you just said you feel about this and about this particular thing. And here's my thoughts on that. So sometimes they're just innocent. They don't know. They just have patterns. So that's another thought, and some varieties of ways to respond to that. Is that helpful, Shamala Kishori, wherever you are out there?
Yes, thank you so much.
Okay, you're welcome.
So we have another question that was sent privately. How do we handle those that are inherently complainers? They want change, but the change they're suggesting is not practical or is not conducive. How do we deal with such people, especially their devotees?
I think that's a ridiculous, stupid, and impractical question. And I don't even know why we're wasting time with it, because this is such a positive exchange here. Why are we even going there, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, we've all experienced that. I mean, I get in that frame of mind. I mean, I have to try to avoid it. You know, we're all, I like the Christian expression, we've all sinned. I don't know exactly what they say. We've all sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. And, you know, we're all broken. We're broken. We're not pure devotees. We all are influenced by the modes of material nature. So I think the first and foremost thing is we want to try to help each other. In the little bit of teaching I do, I always try to emphasize this point, like feedback and assessment. It's all about how to do better. It's not, you know, tell me how I did on this so you can tear me apart, but how can I learn to improve? Tell me what I did well, tell me what I can learn to do better. So I think my thoughts, and there's 1,000 years of devotional experience on this call, so you know, many of you probably answer this better than I can. But my experience working with people that complain, same thing. If you don't have a lot to do with them, but they just complain, well, go somewhere else. You got better things to do. If it's somebody that you work with on a regular basis, if you have a friendly, loving relationship with them, at the right time, the right place, just explain, you know, Prabhu, when you do like this, this is the effect it has. You know, when you complain all the time, I feel like this, and it seems to be a waste of both of our times. So why don't we put it in a more positive way? A third really important thing, let's say someone comes to me and says, Anuttama, you know, the way Govinda Priya organized that event last week, this was wrong, this was wrong, this was wrong. And I think to turn it into a positive, which is, well, you know, Prabhu, you mentioned this to me and I can see you're very concerned about it. I think you need to talk to Govinda Priya and share these thoughts with her so she can do better. Because frankly, I'm only there one time and I can't make the changes you think, you know, so give them the benefit of the doubt that this complaint is coming from a genuine place of wanting to see things better, and help him or her channel it in a way that it can actually make some positive growth. And if they come back and say, well, no, I don't want to do that, I want to talk to her, it's like, well then, you know, really, there's no point talking to me because I can't do anything about it. And one other comment on that, I think it's really important to kind of create this culture of honoring the person who's absent. So, you know, Govinda Priya and I are talking, and Ananda's not there, her name on the front of the screen, you know, and Govinda starts saying, oh, Ananda's like this and Ananda's like that. Same thing. Well, Govinda Priya, why don't you and I go talk to Ananda? It sounds like you're really concerned about her. So, or not talking in a way that we would be uncomfortable if the person is there. So Ananda wants to talk to Govinda Priya, said, well, you know, Anuttama's like, you know, he's an okay GBC, but he really needs to work on this and this and this. And if Anuttama walks up and goes, hi, what are you guys talking about? Ananda can say, well, we're just talking about ways you could improve as a GBC. Hey, that's great, tell me. As opposed to like, what are you guys talking about? Oh, nothing, the weather, you know, that kind of thing is hurtful. So if you're with someone who's complaining or criticizing someone else, just to kind of turn it around and say, well, you know, it sounds like you're concerned about this. One, why don't you talk to them? Two, what can we do to help the situation? Let's not just criticize. What can we do to help the situation? And three, if there's no way to make things better, why don't we talk about something else?
Thank you so much, Prabhu. Such wonderful points. There's a question from Christy. She says, what would you say are the most important traits to nurture to co-live with fellow devotees when living in an ashram, to maintain a healthy community and environment.
Well, without even trying to joke, the first thing that comes to my mind is make sure you go to sleep when they go to sleep and you get up when they get up. I can remember in a brahmachari ashram, one of the worst things was, there was always somebody who stayed up until 11:30 and there was somebody else who got up at 1:30. And so that 2.5 hours of undisturbed sleep was not really so good. So this was like physically living in an ashram, like a temple ashram where you're sharing a room with people. Is that what Christy? I think I see Christy there. Christy, can you nod your head? Is that what you're saying? Yeah. Okay, to nurture. Well, I mean, things we hear all the time. One, I'm the servant of the servant. So I shouldn't be proud. I should always remember I'm this person's servant. Second thing, to remember that I'm here to learn. I'm not necessarily here for the rest of my life. So if there's some things that are inconvenient, let me tolerate them and take the good and not get overly disturbed with the things that are difficult. Third thing, always think about what can I do to make this situation better? If there's some tension in the ashram or some different lifestyles, how can I be the peacemaker? How can I approach people and talk about it? Fourth thing, there has to be regular ishtagostis with those devotees with somebody who's a little senior. So there's a conversation. You check in, hey, how's everybody doing? Well, I'm doing great, but I'm not getting to sleep at all. Well, why not? Because so-and-so's alarm clock goes out, or so-and-so, gets up and uses the bathroom in the middle of the night. And is there any way she could sleep next to the bathroom instead of me? Simple things like that sometimes can really alleviate. But if there's no communications, they just escalate more and more and more. So make sure there's a lot of open communications. Those would be the few things that would come to the top of my mind.
Okay, thank you. So I'm going to club two of these questions over here for you. How can we talk with someone who's not ready to even have a communication, does not want to accept any mistakes, does not want to sit down and talk or work things out, especially when you're in a relationship like marriage and you have no escape to just say, I'll maintain some social distancing.
Social distancing within a marriage, that's a tough one.
Yeah. So how do we deal with someone?
A serious question. So how do we deal with someone who's not open to, what was this specifically going to be? Someone's not open to
any kind of communication and does not want to even have a conversation to whether it's your fault, my fault. There's just ignoring the situation.
Well, I mean, that's a tough one. Let me back up a little bit and say that all of us on this call or interview looks into later, we should always encourage people before, and I'm going to come back to the present, but we should encourage people. These are things that need to be looked at carefully and worked out before you get married. There's premarital counseling, and again, if you're a Swede and you want to walk away every time there's a disagreement, that's fine. It's not that that's good or bad, but it may not work so well with somebody who's Italian. Maybe you can work it out, but maybe you can't, but you need to at least know that could be an issue. And it needs to be put on the table and talked about ahead of time, ideally. And sometimes, we know, the hormones are there, chemistry is there, mode of passion is there, she's good looking, he's good looking, she chants nicely, he chants nicely, and they're married. And then it's like, oh my gosh, who are you and how do you live your life? So we have to slow down that process a little bit. And again, don't make assumptions just because he's a devotee, she's a devotee, that it's necessarily going to be compatible. So that's the first thing. That's really important. We've had too many divorces in our society, and a lot of them are based on the fact people just didn't take their time before they got married. And it doesn't matter if your mother thinks he's nice, if your father thinks he's nice, if your sister says he's really nice, and tell her, you marry him then. If he's so nice, you marry the guy, okay? It's my decision to make. And even spiritual authorities, I mean, even like the guru, even I think in Satsuma Maharaj's book on readings of Vedic literature, years ago, I remember he makes some comment that who you should marry, even that's like an order you can disobey than the guru, right? So in ISKCON today, no guru should be telling anybody who to marry. They can make suggestions, but it's your choice, it's your decision. Take a lot of consultation, take your time, make the right decision. So that's ahead of time. Now, once we're in the relationship, and again, I'm not an expert on all these things, but I'm here and trying to, just fill the time before Rukmini says something. So my thoughts would just be, seek advice from senior people and peers. If you're not able, you know, especially we're talking to ladies here, so let's say you've got a husband who's not so good at these types of things. And men, a lot of times we're not good listeners. We're not so good at relationship building. You know, frankly, it's going to sound ridiculous, but I think until I got married, I don't know if I've ever even heard the word relationship. You know, women's conversations, relationship is like right there in the top, you know, 500 words. For men, until, you know, it's not there. We're just not trained to think like that. We don't naturally think like that. We do have one or two redeeming qualities, but this isn't so much one that we usually have. Some men do, of course, but a lot of us, it's a struggle. So I would get somebody who you know, find somebody, you know, a counselor or someone who you both respect, maybe another couple, you know, who can talk, maybe bring a third person in, you know, understanding the sensitivities. If the husband thinks the wife's complaining to another person, oh, that's tough too. But, you know, try to bring in some senior person, or, you know, if depending on the relationship, you know, share some things. Wow, I just read this book about such and such a topic, and I'd like to share this with you. And like that. Those are my thoughts. And again, there may be a dozen or more people, and you're much more qualified to answer that than me. But that would be some of my thoughts on that.
Thank you so much, Prabhu. I think these are such wonderful, and they come deep down from realizations. I'm going to club another two questions over here. And
okay, don't cut into Rukmini's time, or we'll have to fight about it later tonight. Okay.
We'll give her extra time, and we'll make sure we take all the boxing gloves that she has. So this question is about what if someone picks a fight every time and uses abusive language, especially in front of other people? And I forgive, move on, and then this behavior becomes a pattern and it's repeated. Now, you know, the word abusive has been used. I don't know the degree of abuse that this particular devotee has private messaged me. But just in general, if you're talking about, you know, someone that chastises in front of other people and not sensitive to how you feel.
Okay, well, first of all, it's for anybody who didn't understand it in the past, and there was somehow unbelievably seemed to be some confusion about this. Abuse in any kind of relationship, particularly some kind of domestic abuse, is absolutely thoroughly in opposition to the Vaishnava culture. It's absolutely thoroughly against everything that Srila Prabhupada taught. And just to clarify that, 2 years ago, Nanda Vrindavan was part of this. The North American Temple Presidents, GBCs, passed a statement about domestic abuse, that it's not acceptable. And just this last year in Mayapur, the International GBC passed pretty much the exact same thing. It was modified a little bit for international standards. Just to make the point, because sometimes, I don't know where it comes from, but sometimes there's this sense that, you know, if you're a devotee, that, you know, your wife's your property, or your husband's your property, or your children are your property, and it should be the exact opposite. If we're devotees, we're caretakers, and I'm the servant of my wife, and I'm the servant of my husband, I'm the servant of my kids, and I'm the servant of everybody. We're supposed to serve everybody. So I think, again, that general principle has to be there. People need to understand that. And we know from what I learned doing research on that project, these policies, 85% of the time, if it's a domestic abuse case, it's the man that's the perpetrator. Not always, but 15%. In a male-female relationship, it's 15% female. So women are not, it's not like they never do the same, cause the same problem. But majority of the time it's men. So first, understand it, and I think one is that, you know, I mean, I have a hard time seeing the individual issue. The bigger issues is all of our leaders in our temples have to be teaching these things. You know, there needs to be Sunday feast talks that kind of bring this in. By the way, everybody, Krishna's God, and, you know, don't say nasty things to your wife. And, you know, Krishna's God, and, you know, don't throw pots at your husband. That's a violation of bhakti yoga. And if you have any questions about it, please see me afterwards. And you know, having counseling in communities and things like that. So those are some systematic things we need to do. As far as someone who's in a particular situation where, you know, I have to be careful. I mean, the male energy can be really hurtful. You know, they say there's nothing more destructive than unengaged young male. And I'll be a little vulnerable here. sometimes, I don't know how many times, but more times than it should be, Rukmini will say to me, you know, you just said something in front of my friends that really hurt me. And sometimes in a way of making a joke or something, I may say something, or sometimes just because, you know, I have a little mean streak in me, I try to control it, but I have my shortcomings too. Sometimes I have to go back and stop and think, okay, what did I do wrong and how do I make sure I don't do that again? So ideally, we need to have that kind of open communications where she can say to me, or the woman or the spouse can say to each other, hey, that hurt me. Please, you know, please try to avoid. And he may say, well, I didn't mean to hurt you. But then we have to learn to be open, like, okay, well, maybe you didn't mean it. I accept that you didn't mean it, but here was the effect. Again, what was the term? Your not influence, your intention may have been good, but the impact was not. And so I think that those kind of discussions, we should try to have those kind of discussions at the right time in the right place. It's probably not the right time to bring it up. You know, if he says something that's hurtful, okay, maybe you have to like tolerate it, but wait for the right time, the right place. And I think intuitively women are a lot better than I am, most women, about, you know, when you bring that up, when's the right time, and to do so. And again, maybe get a senior couple to help in that, depending on what the situation is. It's not acceptable. And it's a fact. I mean, I had a father, he never hit me. So compared to a lot of stuff that goes on these days, but verbally abuse, he was good at it. He was really good at it. And he didn't think he was, you know. And he would do things like, he wouldn't tell me you're stupid. He would say, like, if there's one thing I can't stand, it's stupidity. Okay. It's like, okay, now I may be stupid, but I follow the logic on that one. You're only talking to me and you can't stand stupidity and you're getting angry. So, I mean, so who's, and I honestly feel, I genuinely feel he had no malintent there. He didn't mean to hurt me. You know, he just had anger in him and he didn't know how to control it. And who knows what his issues were from his life or past lives. But the bottom line is it has an effect. It hurts people. So, you know, trying to help people be aware and, you know, maybe say, you know, there's two couples that are good friends and maybe, you know, the wife can talk to the husband who can talk to his friend, you know, being very, very careful about the delicate, you know, can be a very delicate situation, but it's not something we just tolerate. And we know as far as domestic abuse, it can, here's the big red flag that comes up, it can escalate. And we really, ideally, it should be kind of nipped in the bud. I know I have a friend, I don't need to mention who or where, who years ago had a husband that hit her once. And she picked up the phone, she called the police and the cops were there and, you know, he went to jail. And he got the message, like, don't mess with this lady, you know. He slapped her once and she called the police. It was like, and they were together for a lot of years after that. They had a nice relationship. But, you know, she made it clear you can't cross that line. And he knew he shouldn't cross that line. But he needed a little bit of a wake-up call. So sometimes that comes into play too.
Thank you so much, Prabhu. These are really wonderful and helpful insights. So I won't put you in.
Let me add one other point, because I'm not professionally trained. I'm not a social worker. I'm not a therapist. I'm not a, you know, trained counselor. So if things are particularly difficult, please seek some professional help. Sometimes, again, devotees think we're not supposed to go to non-devotees. So next time the engine in your car breaks down, you know, call your god sister who's a Bajari and ask her to fix it. Right? We would never do that. You got to get an expert to fix your car, to fix the air conditioning. You know, if you're sick, you go to a medical doctor. So there's relationship issues. You know, feel free. We should seek outside consultation. You don't give them full power of attorney. They may have some ideas that don't make sense, but there may be some things that can really help. So please, you know, we should reach out and make healthy communities and don't feel we can't get help from professionals, because we should and we need to sometimes.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for reinforcing that. I won't put you into further trouble, and we request Rukmini Prabhu to please address us now and share her wonderful realizations. I'm going to unmute you, Rukmini Prabhu. Just give me 1 second. Okay. Yes, you're unmuted.
Thank you very much. That was great. Thank you so much, Anuttama Prabhu. You know, I just, not in any particular order of what I'm thinking, but I just think since you're mentioning approaching professional counselors if there's serious trouble, I really want to not miss the chance to mention Ram Prabhu, who has this fantastic program called Karuna Care. So please, if you are having serious issues in a relationship or even personal serious issues, please call her up, speak to her. She'll make time for you, no matter where you are in the world. So that's a great resource we have right in our own community, Rambru. So right now you might be thinking of someone that you really don't like very much, or someone that you're ready to fight with, or someone that you feel like you kind of hate. And I want to tell a story. There's a man who was part of our Vaishnava Christian dialogue a few years ago. He's a Methodist minister, and he's also an academic. He's a scholar. And he told a story that when he's from somewhere in the South, and he told us a story that when he was in college, he's a white guy, and he approached this African-American student who was one of his fellow students at this university. And he said to his fellow student, he said, I have a problem, and I need your help solving this problem. And this fellow student said, what's your problem? And he said, my problem is that I was raised to hate you. And I don't see how that's taught anywhere in the Bible. So I need your help with solving this problem. And so what happened was he started going to the home of this fellow student for dinner, and, you know, having that student come to his home. They became friends and confidants and developed a lot of trust for each other. And he worked through this illusion that he was raised to think that he should be hating this person. So I thought that was a really powerful story that's meant a lot to me in my life. So yeah, so if you're thinking about fighting, who should you not fight with or argue with? Sometimes we want to fight, but sometimes we realize that we're trying to fight with a superior person, a certain circumstance. Like, for example, Krishna and Arjuna, right? Arjuna had so many great arguments. He had so many moral imperatives and cultural concerns and so many reasons that he felt that he was right in the circumstance. But then at a certain point, he realized that I'm trying to fight with a superior person here. It's time that I actually throw down my weapons and take shelter of Lord Krishna and surrender to him and get his advice in this circumstance. And there's another example of that I think is interesting. This is a story that Srila Prabhupada was standing in front of the deities in Los Angeles. And Krishna started telling him that, and Prabhupada told this story himself later in a room conversation. Krishna started telling him, now it's time for you to go back to India. This was 1970. And Krishna told him, Prabhupada, it's time for you to go back to India now. And Prabhupada said, no, India is the Prabhudatta Desh for my God brothers. My preaching field is here in the US, in America. And I'm developing this Los Angeles temple so nicely, and it's coming along nicely. I don't want to go back to India now. And Krishna told him, no, you go back to India. I'll give you a better temple. So it's such an amazing story. Prabhupada was fighting with Krishna, and he had to surrender. He went back to India, and of course, look at the history. Vrindavan temple, Mayapur temple, Mumbai, all these amazing temples. So when you're fighting with someone who is superior in a certain way, maybe in all ways, maybe you shouldn't be fighting with that particular person. Another example is when Prabhupada was fighting with his Guru Maharaj, when he first met his Guru Maharaj, and he was saying, well, you know, this Chaitanya Vaishnavism is very nice, but who will listen to India? We're a dependent nation. So now first we should get independence before we try to spread Krishna consciousness. And his Guru Maharaj said, no, this mission is so urgent that it can't wait. And so Prabhupada said later that he was happy to be defeated by his Guru Maharaj. So that's a very interesting thing, to be happy by being defeated by someone in argument when you realize this person has superior understanding in this circumstance. So in my own situation, Anuttama Prabhu, in our marriage, he's much better at finances than I am. And we do discuss, but when there are major financial decisions, I think the right thing is to let him win. And by the same token, aesthetics and design and what goes somewhere and what doesn't go somewhere, it's more important to me. And I kind of appreciate being the deciding voice on those little small matters. And he kind of lets me have the decision on those kinds of things. So talking about boundaries and choosing your battles. And what's more important, as he was saying in the beginning, honoring the relationship or winning the argument. So sometimes it's said that healthy people have boundaries that keep the good things in and the bad things out. And unhealthy people have boundaries that keep the bad things in and the good things out. So talking about arguing, or as Anuttama's parents used to call it, discussing, we can discuss in different modes of nature. We have so much information from Bhagavad Gita about the 3 modes of nature. So the first type of discussing is in the mode of goodness. It's called vada in Sanskrit, talks in the mode of goodness, when it's the desire of both parties to find the truth. And often it's exemplified in a guru-disciple relationship, or even in a heartfelt discussion between trusted friends, or two serious people on the path, maybe they're peers, just discussing, trying to understand, trying to go deeper. That can be a very rewarding relationship. I would say I have that kind of relationship with my dear friend Ananda Vrindavan. We discuss, we hammer things out. Sometimes we take different perspectives, but it's a very rewarding friendship. I was thinking of Giriraj Maharaj when he met Srila Prabhupada. He said, how can I recognize my guru? And Prabhupada said to him, so wisely, he said, it depends on your ultimate goal. Do you want to become God, or do you want to learn to serve God? And then Giriraj Maharaj realized that he was in the presence of a real true guru, and that he had been wanting to become God actually. And here was a guru who was going to teach him how to love and serve God. The great Christian teacher Paul Tillich said that the first duty of love is to listen. So I find that really powerful. The first duty of love is to listen. So then the second type of arguing, or you could say discussing, is called jalpa. It's when one or both of the participants just wants to be heard, waiting for the other person to stop talking, to make your point, and both parties are just invested in their own perspectives and have difficulty seeing the other person's point of view. So this is a description of the mode of passion, right? And it's so often the norm when we discuss with other people, even devotees, even senior devotees sometimes, just waiting till you stop talking so they can make their point, right? So then the third one is called vitanda, talking or arguing in the mode of ignorance, where one or both of the participants, based on their own desire just to win, will say anything to just defeat the other person, objectifying the other person, victimizing, character assassination. And this is something we're seeing so often in the political arena today, where truth is irrelevant and there's so much fake news, right? So yeah, these are some thoughts on discussing or arguing in 3 different modes of nature. I want to tell a story. Anuttama touched on this a little bit. I want to talk about the power of an apology. There's a story about a music teacher. He took his his high school students to New York City to hear a concert that was going to be conducted by a very famous conductor. And he went to a lot of trouble, a lot of expense to arrange this concert, to arrange this trip out of town, out of state, to bring his students. So then what happened was, when they got there, 3 of the girls that were in the class skipped out of the concert and they went shopping. And the teacher was so angry. Afterwards, he was telling his wife, those brats, those ungrateful brats, I went to so much trouble, so much expense, and this was so important for their education, and they had no gratitude. And so his wife was very wise, and she said, I think you owe them an apology. And he said, what? Me owe them an apology? And she said, think about it. And so he did. And the next day he called these 3 girls into his office, and they were, you know, kind of looking at each other. They knew that what they had done, and they knew that they were wrong. And they thought, what's going to happen? Are we going to get expelled? Are we going to get flunked? What's going to happen? And so he said to them, he said, I really have to apologize to you. And they're looking at each other like, what? He's going to apologize to us? We should be apologizing to him. But he said, no, I really have to apologize to you because I really failed you in your education. I didn't impress upon you how important hearing this concert, attending this concert was for your musical education. So I apologize to you because this was my failure to you. So this is a great lesson. Rather than accusing them, shouting at them, imagine they would have just been defensive. So that's about the power of an apology. I have another story I want to share with you. This story is about another something Anuttama touched on a little bit. This is about not making assumptions. And here's the story. There was a couple, a young couple in Vietnam, and the husband was called off to the war. His wife was pregnant, and he had to leave and go fight in this war. And he was gone for 2.5, 3 years. And when he came back, his little son had been born, and they were so happy, and they were both so happy. And the wife went to the market to get some fruits to offer, to pay respects to their ancestors, as was their custom. And while she was gone, the husband was trying to get the little boy, who really didn't know him, he was trying to get the little boy to call him daddy. He was saying, please call me daddy, I'm your daddy. And the little boy said to him, you're not my daddy. He said, the one who comes at night, he's my daddy. And the young husband was devastated. And he didn't know what to think. He didn't know what to do. And he was so hurt. When his wife came back from the market, he just left and he went to the bar, and he just stayed there till late at night. And then the next day he went again. And every day he was just spending the whole day, the whole night in the bar. And his wife didn't know what was going on. She didn't know what to think. She didn't know what to do. And so finally, she was so devastated. Sorry, this is a painful story, but she was so devastated that she just jumped in the river and committed suicide. So then here he's left with this small boy and without his wife. And in their little hut at night, he turned on the lamp. And when he turned on the lamp in their hut, their shadows came on the wall. And his little son said, that's my daddy. The one who comes at night, he's my daddy. So it ends up that this little boy's mother, because the other children in the village all had their daddies, and this little boy didn't have his daddy there. So when the shadows would come on the wall at night, she would tell him, that's your daddy, that's your daddy. So it's a very painful story that you could say, whose fault was it? Think about it, right? It was both of their fault, right? Why didn't they communicate? Why didn't they inquire? Why are you so upset? Why weren't they curious to ask? Why are you going to the bar and spending the whole day there? What's making you so upset? What are you holding in your heart? That's the question, right? What are you holding in your heart? But neither one of them communicated. Neither one of them inquired why. They made assumptions, and the situation ended in tragedy. So I want to tell you a happier story. So we have friends, they're on the Grihastha Vision team, Uttama and Partha. Actually, here's a little advertisement for our Urban Devi Sangha tomorrow. Uttama is going to be speaking from 2 to 3:30 p.m. East Coast, US East Coast time about troubleshooting relationships. So it's a similar topic, but they've been married for 49 years. Imagine that. And she told me that they've never had a fight. And I said, what? That's unbelievable. You've never had a fight? And I said, well, how do you do it? And she said, we don't fight, we collaborate. So collaboration is a win-win. So let's back up a little bit, and I want to basically describe 5 different ways of responding to conflict. Some may work in a certain time or situation, and not all are effective in maintaining long-term, mutually satisfying relationships. So the first one I want to talk about is competition, a confrontational style that results in a loser and a winner, and where the value is placed more on being right than on being loved. And often approval is confused with love, right? So this type of dealing with conflict might work in an emergency situation. Like what? Like, say, for example, you have a child who's sticking a metal utensil in an electric socket and about to get electrocuted, right? There's no time for discussion. It's an urgent situation. You just have to win that one, right? So, yeah. So this competition. And here's a nice quote from the great Catholic teacher Thomas Merton about this immature, competitive consciousness. He says, love is not a matter of getting what you want. Quite the contrary. The insistence on always being satisfied, on always being fulfilled, makes love impossible. To love, you have to climb out of the cradle, where everything is about getting, and grow up to the maturity of giving without concern for getting anything special in return. Thomas Merton. So then the second response to conflict that many of us are aware of is called avoidance. It doesn't really resolve the conflict, and it might be appropriate when time is limited and resolving the particular conflict is not really that important. So, you know, we've all heard choose your battles, right? So a turtle, he puts his head into the shell, and the ostrich puts his head in the sand, and a rabbit closes the eyes. And even in Bhagavad Gita, it mentions that a yogi has to know when to withdraw his senses from sense objects. So we need discernment to use our intelligence when and where to engage our senses, or when in a conversation. But in relationships, sometimes someone who's fearful or uncomfortable with conflict might often choose this kind of avoidance. Sometimes when avoidance is the primary conflict resolution style, someone usually gets hurt, and the problem usually resurfaces later, and it's often worse in the meantime, right? So number 3, it's similar to avoidance. This one's called accommodation. This one includes one person giving in to the other person's demands. So sometimes it's useful when we see that the other person's needs about a certain thing are greater than our own. And we feel that self-sacrifice would be good for the relationship. Like, I'll give you an example from my own marriage relationship. Anuttama, Prabhu, maybe he wants more ice cream. And I say, you know, ice cream is not good for you. You know, you're going to have a cold and a cough tomorrow. No, I want more ice cream. So, okay, you know, ice cream is so important to him. Okay, have your ice cream. And then the best thing is the next morning, if he's coughing and sneezing, don't say, hey, I told you so, right? So, but if accommodation is always the modus operandi of a person, you ask yourself, am I enabling inappropriate behavior here? And am I doing that all the time? And am I harboring resentments because of that? So that's a good thing to ask yourself. Or ask the other person, right? So then number 4 is compromise. Giving something in order to get something. So usually mediators like Braj Bihari or other mediators, Brahmatirtha Prabhu, they might often use this compromise because it's often useful when the time is limited and there's not that much opportunity to explore other options. And after short-term compromise, the problem is sometimes people feel angry and sometimes they feel like they gave away too much. And they wonder if a more collaborative solution could have been found, right? So compromise is sometimes useful when time is short, right? But then finally, the option that Uttama and Partha have used so successfully in their 49 years of marriage is this idea of collaboration. It's a win-win approach to conflict, and it gives the most satisfactory and long-term resolutions to problems. It takes more time, but it's important to use when both the relationship and the issue that you're fighting or discussing about are both important. So collaboration uses creative brainstorming. What a great term, right? To find solutions where a win-win situation, a win-win type of problem solving is most important. So think about it. I mean, as you hear these 5 methods, which are your usual default responses to conflict? Which one do you most often tend to use? Competition, avoidance, accommodation, compromise. Personally, I'd like to grow in the direction of the win-win of creative brainstorming. And collaboration may take more time, but it honors both the issue at hand as well as the relationship. So I wanted to next speak a little bit about shame and blame, right? And many of you have gardens. Some of you are growing tomatoes or growing roses, growing some veggies in your garden. But does it really work if you go up, if you see that your lettuce or your tomatoes aren't really coming up this year, to stand in front of the tomato plants and say, hey, you stupid tomatoes, what's wrong with you? Can't you get it together? Don't you know you're supposed to be growing and giving beautiful, delicious, succulent tomatoes by now? It's the end of July, you stupid plants. Does it work? I mean, will it help the tomato plants to grow? So foolishly, we tend to use this in our relationships with humans, right? We see it's not going to work on a plant. Is it going to work better on a human? We say, you stupid kid, you stupid woman, you crazy old lady. Maybe you say to your mom, you crazy old lady. Or maybe you say to your husband or your partner, you useless bum of a husband. Well, is that going to be effective? Is it going to be effective with children or with a partner or with friends or sibs or elderly people? Does it serve to inspire anyone? Does it help anyone become a better person? So no, right? So when we're gardening and maybe the tomatoes are not fructifying, we look at solutions. We think, well, maybe there was too much rain. Maybe there wasn't enough sun this year. Maybe it's the wrong kind of soil. Did I forget to water them all week? Maybe I should have put in some fertilizer. So there's a nice quote from Russian Orthodox saint, Saint Gregory the Great. And he says, he was called great, and he says something about great people. He says, great people usually have somebody around them who expects them to be better than they have any intention of being. Isn't that beautiful? So someone who helps you become better than you have any intention of being. So another point is try not to take conflicts personally and try to separate people from problems. try to separate people from their behavior or their actions? Can we pray to be able to forgive and to be forgiven? Here's a nice quote from Srimad Bhagavatam. This material world is full of embarrassing and irritating situations. Unless one is inclined to be very much forgiving, he will be infected by a vindictive mentality which spoils one's spiritual consciousness. So that, if you want to look it up, it's Srimad Bhagavatam, 11th Canto, Chapter 3, the purport to verse 24. So can we try to come to the elevated platform of try to hate the sin and not the sinner? I don't like your behavior rather than I don't like you or I hate you. So I have a little story that once I was doing some service with a very special devotee, Vishnu Jan Swami. We were rolling Simply Wonderfuls in the Los Angeles temple. And someone came into the room and said I don't even remember what the person said, but it was some kind of off the wall, ridiculous comment that was so offensive and inappropriate. And we both kind of went, huh? And Vishnu Jan Swami, he said so wisely, he said, oh, he must have a cloud passing through his head today. He must have a cloud passing through his head today. And I've always remembered that. It's so funny because I don't remember what the other person said, but I do remember this because he wasn't blaming the person. He wasn't saying, oh, what a stupid comment, what a stupid person. He was just saying he's a good person. But today he just has a little cloud passing through his head. So, in closing, I want to share some wise words from Bhaktitirtha Swami about relationships. Here's what he has to say. He is so great at relationships, and I always love to quote him. He says, we ultimately want relationships because we want a community of love. We want to live a full life because life itself is really a love affair. If we're not in loving environments or relationships, we'll be having real problems with the quality of our existence. When we're not happy, it means that we're forgetting our identity and our purpose. Our dissatisfaction means that we're missing opportunities to share love, to give love, and to receive love. So, yeah, remember those hummingbirds that we mentioned at the beginning of this talk? Well, they're so beautiful, aren't they? But when they're too busy fighting with each other, they're not able to drink the nectar. And we've all come to Krishna consciousness, to the path of bhakti yoga, to try to access, to taste the nectar of immortality. As Bhagavad Gita says, to taste the eternal, 13th chapter Bhagavad Gita, to taste the eternal. And let's keep that goal forefront in our hearts. Let's keep our eyes on the prize and not get sidetracked by petty disagreements. Let's seek to develop our relationship with Krishna and his devotees who are his heart. The devotees are Krishna's heart. And all living beings are his beloved parts and parcels. So if we want to fight, maybe we should look to battle the enemy within, my own unbridled mind and senses. Someone or something may be pushing my buttons or triggering me, but look for that ouch factor, because maybe when something triggers me, maybe I'm harboring some similar issues within myself. So yeah, so drink deep the taste of the eternal, the nectar for which we are always anxious. And if I'm distracted by fighting like those hummingbirds, maybe other people who are more eager, more deserving, can get the chance, can get the taste of bhakti instead of me. So thank you all very much. Hare Krishna.
Right. Thank you so much, Rukmini Prabhu. Such wonderful and beautiful connections you've made. Very, very, very grateful. I'm going to unmute Anuttama Prabhu as well. So we have a couple questions. I'm thinking if you want to elaborate. So,
we could try. We could try.
So I'm going to paraphrase this question here. As devotees, we understand that we should make adjustments, and every relationship takes adjustments, takes some working, But at the same time, how do we understand when is the right time to speak up and when is the right time to stay quiet and make an adjustment?
Go first.
I should go first? Well, I think that's a very deep question. And I think it takes a lot of meditation. It takes a lot of discernment. And, you know, maybe since I'm looking at Anuttama Prabhu right in front of me, I would say that I'm not very good at this because I tend to be kind of impetuous. He always says, like even a few hours ago, he says, I'm slow. When he mentioned these chairs we're trying to decide about, he says, I'm slow. So he's more thoughtful, like he won't shoot off an email telling someone what he thinks of them. He'll think about it. He won't send that email till the next day. Or sometimes right at that moment when there's too much tension is not the moment to bring it up. Sometimes, well, I'll tell you a story of Prabhupada. In Boston, one lady, she was an expert cook and actually a very proud person as well. And she was so expert, but somehow when in the heat of cooking for Prabhupada, she forgot that she had already salted the sabji. So Prabhupada didn't say anything about it. But when the Mahaprasadam came to all of us, it was inedible. And we were all saying, oh, you know, you salted it twice. It's horrible. Nobody could eat it. Such an offense, blah, blah, blah. But Prabhupada hadn't said anything. But then the next day, she cooked so beautifully and everything was so perfectly done. And Srila Prabhupada hadn't said anything the day before. But on the second day, he said, oh, today everything is so nice. Yesterday it was a little salty. But, you know, so like that. So sometimes you have to bite your tongue. Sometimes we have to bite our tongue and think, when will be the appropriate time? Like maybe if someone says something mean to you, then you don't bite their head off right then and there. How dare you say that? That's so mean and offensive. But maybe wait until there's a better time to say, hey, you know, I was really hurt by what you said. You know, maybe you didn't mean it, but this is how I received it. So I think discretion is so important. It's such an important concept and such an important word. So maybe use discretion.
Sure, thank you. Anuttama Prabhu, would you like to add something?
Yeah, that was a great answer and a wonderful story. I would just add, I think again, we have to kind of stop and think about what's my goal. A materialistic person is thinking my goal in life is to quote, live life to the fullest, express myself, enter into relationships, and I break off relationships all based on that. You know, if you're bringing me personal gratification, you know, you're my friend. And if that goes sour, then you're out of here. So it's all based on me. And of course, there's many wonderful, you know, millions of wonderful people in the world. We don't have a monopoly on good qualities. We don't all have great qualities. You know, we're all mixtures. But we are, we've identified that we want to move in that way. That's what our goal is. It's not just about living in the moment. So I think when we're in relationships, when there's some difficulties, if we're thinking, well, what's my goal? You know, is, you know, for me, does something that whatever my mind says is irritating. Is my goal to express my anger? Because, you know, there's some gratification in expressing yourself and making a big scene and, you know, being a drama queen or whatever. You know, there's some gratification in that. You know, we've all know that there's that kind of so-called pleasure, but it's not pure. You know, it's not based on anything but the lower modes of nature. So to be able to ask ourselves, what's my real goal here? Is it to, you know, be the king of the castle or the queen of the castle? Okay, you can go on and you act out every emotion you feel, say everything that's unreasonable. But if we're actually thinking that, no, the goal is something higher, then I can absorb more negativity and I will be sure to be a positive force as much as possible because I've got a better purpose. So I know, like I sit in a lot of committees and I've got a few folks that I fall at their feet and love them dearly, and God, are they difficult to deal with. But you know, it's like, okay, so, but what's my purpose? You know, my purpose here, by my being here, their being here, we're doing something that's helping Prabhupada, helping the movement, helping devotees. Well, okay, you know, then I have to put up with it sometimes. Well, you're muted, Rukmini.
Yeah, sorry, give me 1 minute.
We missed that last comment. You were muted. You're still muted.
I'm unmuting you.
I think you might have to push a button, Rukmini, down on the left.
Am I unmuted?
Now you are. Now you are. Oops, we lost it again.
Okay, you want to hit the button only once. Hold on. I'll do it. I'll do it.
Speak now and we see if you're unmuted. No.
Am I unmuted now?
Yes.
Okay. So that was so wise. And you reminded me of something that I read today from Stephen Covey, who's a great leadership guru. And he said, begin today with the image of the end of your life as your frame of reference by which everything else is examined. Each day will then contribute to the vision you have of your life as a whole. So that was kind of along the lines of what you were saying. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So anyone else has any more questions or comments they would like to share? And I think we have time to have some personal discussions as well. So I've enabled unmuting for everyone in case you want to unmute yourself and say something, express your gratitude, or ask a question, make a comment.
There's more that we can share also if there aren't questions. So.
Yes, please share, Rukmini.
No, I want to hear a question from you, my dear friend, Urvashi.
Haribol.
I like your backdrop. It's really beautiful.
Yeah, that's a picture I took of sunset in Ojai.
So
on
beautiful.
Main Street.
So beautiful.
Thank you. Well, I do have one question that just kind of came up. And it's kind of bizarre, but I'm talking to the right people here. So either one of you, is it ever appropriate to like hang up on someone if they're just out of control, angry, and you can't get in a word and you're trying to be patient, but they're just screaming at you? And can you just hang up? Is that appropriate?
Wait, oh, go ahead. Please go ahead.
Yeah, my answer would be yes, but just tell them ahead of time.
That's exactly what I was going to say.
Yeah, so, I've done that, and I don't even know if they heard because they wouldn't stop talking.
That's exactly what I was going to say. I was going to say, please excuse me. I'm going to hang up the phone now because I'm not able to reply to what you're saying. So please forgive me, but I am putting down the phone now.
Yes. Yes.
I don't think this is being very productive right now, so it's probably not good for us to continue on. Let's talk in a few days when we're both feeling better. Click.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Yep.
I've done that a few times.
Okay, I feel better.
So now you're certified by the GBC.
Yes. And then immediately I got a text message and then an email, all on the same tone. At least, yeah. Okay, thank you.
But even to the text message and the email, you could respond in the same way. Just like what Anuttama Prabhu so wisely said, let's talk in a few days when we're both thinking more clearly, and don't shame and blame that person, take responsibility. I was also disturbed, so let's talk in a few days when we've both had a chance to calm down a bit.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much. So we have Tulasilata Prabhu has raised her hand. I'm going to unmute you, Tulasilata.
Hare Krishna Mataji, Dandavat Pranam, all glories to Srila Prabhupada.
All glories to Srila Prabhupada.
Mataji, are you talking about the fighting between husband and wife, only the couples, or also in the family, the external people also?
We're talking about all kinds of conflicts. We're talking about conflicts with kids, teenagers, your mom, your dad, your girlfriends at the temple, everyone.
I have a question.
Okay.
I have a question. Like, you know, I deal with my mother's, I mean, from the childhood only, like I had a very horrible relationship with my mother that I should, I should tell, not, so thing is that how shall we, like as a girl, I know her nature and all, how to tell her that she was wrong in something. Like she has everything, whatever she says, she has a justification, and she tells as if I did right. I was right. So, but it was very clear when, you know, I could see that, you know, she is taking money. She's making money as priority than relationship, and that had many times. I'm talking with her. So how shall I tell, like, you know, when she is wrong, she has a justification for everything. She has justification, and she says, I am always right. So such person, like, you know, if not I'm a daughter, but such person is there. I mean, I too have someone whom I am acquaintance. She also have the same attitude, that, you know, I'm always right. What I did is exactly right. If you were in my place, you would have done the same thing. If they have that attitude, like how to say them that, you know, no, you could have done something else, but it is very, very difficult for them.
Have you ever heard the saying that your actions are speaking so loudly that I can't hear a word you're saying? You know, your actions are speaking so loudly that I can't hear a word you're saying. Or sometimes there's a beautiful quote from St. Francis. He said, I try to preach all day long, and if necessary, I also use a few words. But having said that, there's also a caveat that it's not very easy for a mother to hear corrections or preaching from a daughter. You know, the mother, especially in an Indian cultural context, the mother is not going to be able to hear.
I agree, Mataji. She actually, I stepped back. But thing is that she has not, okay, I gave up that. I cannot change her. I cannot give corrections. But she tells herself that, you know, in this whole world, there is no person who could give my answers. So I have such a thing. So you know everything about me. If some external, suppose she meets you, okay, she has some issue and she tells that, and you give some answer. So what she does is, she doesn't know me. What she knows, she just met me for few minutes or few days or few years. Does she know everything about me? No. So whatever her answer is, that she is thinking like that. But I have went through so much, no? That doesn't, that is not an answer.
Sure, Tulasilata.
I have a
Thank
response to that, Govinda Priya.
Yes, Prabhu, please.
My response would be, for all of us, a term you may be familiar with, we all have a circle of influence, and we have a circle of concern. And my guess is your mother's probably 60, 70 years old. Yeah?
Yes, Prabhu. How did you know?
It's not going to change. It's not going to change. So we have things that we can be concerned about, like, how am I going to change my father? Okay, it's not going to happen. Or how am I going to change, you know, the way President Trump runs the country? It's not going to happen. But I have areas of influence. I can change the way I deal with my family. I can deal with the way I deal with my neighbors. I can have some influence on ISKCON. I can't influence the whole global religious society. So wherever you actually can make a difference, then we make a difference there. And those other things, sometimes you just have to let it go. Otherwise, we waste all our time trying to think, oh, I wish I could change her or change that. But meanwhile, the things we can change, we miss. And then we become part of the problem.
Thank you so much, Prabhu. That was really wonderful point. I think we have a few more questions. So Anasuya has.
Sorry, Mataji. Sorry for.
Oh, thank you so much, Tulasilata. Hare Krishna. Anasuya, I'm going to unmute you.
Hare Krishna. Accept my obeisances all goes to Prabhupada. Once I was actually relating my experience when Tulasilata was talking about her mother. One thing, I went to the same thing with my mother. We've had a very nice hatred relationship. What helped me was
Lost you.
What helped me was prayer. My mom left her body, I think 3 years ago, and prayer is what helped me. And the more I prayed, the more I learned to be detached from her comments. I don't know how it worked, but prayer works. I've learned that. And the more, and another thing that I also learned is, like what Anuttama Prabhu said, you just can't change your parents. So I just continued to do what I had to do as a daughter, my service to her, let her say what she wants to say, let her fuss. I just pray, I do my service, and I be detached and leave the rest to Krishna. That took me years to work on it, years. I have to say 20 years. And when she left her body, I can honestly say, and even when she was leaving her body, that 2 years, it was like a lot of hatred with her. At one point, I think when she was leaving 6 months before she had dementia, she didn't even recognize me. She thought that I was the servant of the house. I don't know what she thought. It didn't hurt me, because by the time I said, Krishna, you know what? I'm handing her over to you. I've done my service. And when she passed away, I was content. And that's what helped me.
That's a beautiful answer. Never underestimate the power of prayer. Never underestimate the power of prayer. Very powerful. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
There's a hand up, Govinda Priya. Jala Dasi.
Somehow I don't see any more hands here, but maybe you are.
Got her physical hand up. She's
oh, okay. All right. I'm unable to see all the physical hands, but okay. I'm unmuting you. Shraddhanjali, Prabhu.
Shraddhanjali, Haribol.
Hare Krishna, can you hear me?
Haribol, Haribol. So good to see you.
Oh, Hare Krishna, I'm so happy to meet you. What the last two devotees talked about, is I think a common theme among many of us, that a mother wouldn't listen. And it took me many years to realize that within my Krishna consciousness, I had the tools to be able to change that for my children. And even though I wasn't very good at it at first, and I mean, they're all grown up now, but I had an incredible experience with my eldest daughter in Texas when she's a grown woman, who I was very anxious, something happened and I was freaking out and anxious. I wouldn't listen to her. And my husband and practice what everyone was preaching, okay, not at that moment, but later in the evening, they said, you need to listen to your daughter. And somehow, after praying so hard to be the kind of mother I wanted to be to her, as opposed to someone who didn't listen, somehow Krishna gave me the mercy to listen to her. And it changed my life. I became less anxious. I honored her as an adult, and our relationship became so much better. And it's like, it's giving yourself that prayer. It was many years of praying that I could somehow execute a better relationship with my daughter than I had with my mother, even though my mother loved me, but all that. And it's a lot of prayer, and prayer is strong, that at that moment, if you're open to the mercy, it'll come. If you're quiet, if you don't react too strongly, pause, practice pausing. And in that pause, the mercy came, I heard, I changed. And so I only relate this just so that this process works. And not that we didn't make mistakes later on, but since that moment, it really did change for the better in a permanent way. Even though ups and downs still go, they're at a higher level of trust. So I just wanted to say that the process at one point worked for us. So I just offer that to you.
Thank you so much. So beautiful. Beautifully put. Thank you very much.
I love you, Rukmini.
I love you too. Will you be my mama? I think that's the name of a kid's book. Will you be my mama? Something like that.
Jai. Thank you so much. We're just getting some appreciation here in the chat. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Anuttama Prabhu and Rukmini.
One other story if you want. We got a few minutes left.
I saw you brought
I
a
have a story
painting. I want to know, what was that painting about? Anuttama Prabhu, you know, Dad got a painting. We want to hear the story.
He knows this painting very well. Can you see it?
All right, what's with this painting?
Well, just an example of how we all learn to kind of go with the flow in each other's relationships. Like she said, she's the finance, you know, I'm a little more aware of the financial picture. She's the artistic one, and she likes to be in charge of what happens artistically. So we were in Venice one time on a communications trip, and I stopped and bought a little tiny painting that was an 8 by 10 for about $10, and she really, really disliked it. So I got it framed, but she really, really doesn't like it. I think it's quite beautiful. And so it just sits on my bookshelf in the corner because she's in charge of what gets hung in the house. So I still like it, and, you know, I don't have an office in separate right now. So part of it is, you know, I have to cede that authority to her. She's in charge of the house. And anytime I pull it out, which I did just a couple of weeks ago because we moved, and I said, Rukmini, you think there's a place? And her nose kind of turned up, and she's, you know, and I just put it back in the bookshelf. So.
But if you remember what I actually said, here's our little collaboration, creative brainstorming, because, you know, I actually realized that it's not the painting I dislike so much, it's the frame. And I think I'm the one who chose the frame because it was cheap or it was free or something. So I think actually the painting's not so bad. So please forgive me for all the ways I've trashed and dissed your painting that you bought, but I think it was actually my fault because it's the frame that's so ugly, not the painting itself.
So thank you for this call, Govinda Pri, because now that we've clarified she actually likes it, as soon as we're going to go around the house and find a good place for it. This is really a phenomenal breakthrough.
You're going to have to send us a picture when it's up on the wall.
Those collaborative effort and the, you know, from the prayers of all of the Vaishnavis here, we made some breakthrough, you know. I wanted to share one other story. It's another one from Stephen Covey. We normally don't quote him so much, but anyway, some of the things he said is real relevant to this. I think this is nice in this context. He tells a story how he was, you know, traveling, teaching relationships and things like that. I'm pretty sure it's a Covey story. But somebody came up to him and said, I've got a problem. He said, what's that? He said, you're talking about how we have to love each other and, you know, our families and all that. And Covey was a Mormon, so family values are really important to him. And this man told me, he said, but, you know, I don't love my wife anymore. I don't know what to do. Again, some of you heard the story before. And Covey told me, he said, well, then you just have to love her. And the man said, no, you don't understand my point. I don't love her anymore. What should I do? And he said, well, then you have to love her. And he said, I'm really sorry. I don't understand what you're saying. I'm telling you I don't love my wife anymore. Well, what do you mean by this? He you know, he said, love is not a feeling. It's an action. So maybe, you know, emotionally we may feel affectionate. You know, maybe our mother drives us nuts sometimes, and other times we feel really grateful. We appreciate it. Those emotions come and go. But love is actually an action. You know, caring for our parents, whether they're, you know, their comments put aside and all of that. You know, and again, we're not also expert at, I'm not so expert at it at all, but trying, that we just remember that it's not a question of how do I feel. You know, one day I feel really committed to my Guru Maharaj and to Prabhupada and to the movement. Other days I don't. That doesn't mean I don't chant one day because I don't feel like it. It doesn't mean I don't go to try to serve God because I don't feel like it one day, or like one day I feel like going to the office, the next day I don't feel like I don't do it. But we act on that. You know, love means to act and to identify those are the values I want to live out. Those are the qualities I want to have. That's the way I want to deal with people, whether I feel like it or not. So I always thought that was a really powerful story that you may, even if you don't love her, you should love her. And it's such a transcendental, beautiful definition of love. It's not just the stuff you see in the movies about, you know, you glossy eyed and it lasts for a few days and then everything falls apart. But it's much deeper than that.
That's wonderful. Actually, I want to share something. We were having a meeting with Ananda, and Ananda asked me as a sign-off question, if you ever get a tattoo, you know, she's really good at these sign-off questions. If Ananda, you're hearing, and give us a sign-off question. So if you ever get a tattoo, what is it going to be? I found my answer now. It's going to be love means action. Thank you so much. I love it. It's beautiful.
Nice. Beautiful.
I'm going to put Ananda on the spot if she has any sign-off questions for us. Are you here, Ananda? She's going to kill me. Is she here? All right.
We could end with a joke. Can we end with a joke?
Absolutely.
Okay, Anasuya's heard this before. Can I tell the elephant joke, Rukmini?
If you must.
I think this is great. I've shared this with GBC members. Just, you know, GBC members also are people, despite some of the popular misinformation going around the world. And
but wait, before you tell the joke, I think you should tell the psychology behind, like, what are you doing when you tell a joke in a GBC meeting? What's your purpose? I mean, there's a reason, right?
Laugh.
Huh?
My purpose is to laugh.
Yeah, to help everybody lighten up, not take themselves so seriously.
I know,
right?
Lord, important. My good friend and mentor, Savas Prabhu, was the temple president of Los Angeles. He was so expert at getting all the brahmacharis, who brahmacharis can be a little uptight sometimes. He was really good at getting us all to lighten up. So I appreciate him. Anyway, here's this joke. It's a simple one. So I guess it's a riddle. It's a question to all of you. So why is it that we never see big elephants hiding in trees, in the tops of tall trees? Why is it we never see big elephants hiding in the tops of tall trees?
There's answers in the chat.
You have an answer, Brenda? Do you have an idea? No? Can I tell you all what it is? Anasuya, you give up? Okay. So the question is, why is it we never see big elephants hiding in the top of big trees? Because they're so good at it. Because they're so good at it, Anasuya. Okay, we should quit now. It can't get any worse than that, huh?
I have one thing to say, please.
Oh, yes.
Okay. So I heard this quote this morning. It's very beautiful. So it goes, I asked for strength from God, and God gave me brains and bronze. I asked for opportunity. God gave me challenges. I asked for love from God. God gave me those whom I can help. I received nothing I asked for, but everything I needed.
Wow, so beautiful. Beautiful. Thank you so much.
Love you guys. Thank you so much for this. This is so enlightening and so endearing. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much. Thank you for being here, and thank you for the beautiful sharing.
Thank you so much, Prabhuji. Thank you so much, Mataji.
So I think we can all unmute and express our gratitude to Anuttama Prabhu and Rukmini Prabhu by a loud cry of Hari Bol.
Hari Bol!
Hari Bol!
Oh, my dear.
Very much.
Thank you, Hare Krishna.
Thank you so much, Anuttama Prabhu and Rukmini Prabhu. for this enlivening talk and discussion. We're so very grateful, and we hope you'll join us again sometime in the near future. And like Rukmini Prabhu said, Uttama Prabhu is going to be speaking at Urban Devi tomorrow. So you can find more details on either Facebook or
urbandevi.com
or urbandevi.com. And our next session is going to be by Krishna Nandini Prabhu
Hari-bol.
in a couple weeks. So look out for more information. If you haven't signed up for the newsletter, please head on to Vaishnavi Ministry NA, sign up for the newsletter. And we will be sending you a link to the recording of this session and also your feedback form, which is what we base all these sessions on. So it's divided into different categories. Please take the time to fill that out. That really helps us serve your. So thank you so much once again. Thank you for joining in and participating so actively. And this is what makes the Sangha so special and beautiful. Thank you. Jai.
Thank you, Govinda Priya Prabhu.
Thank you.
Hare Krishna, Jai Prabhupada.
Jai Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.